Well, good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here, wilhitewx.com. I'm going to bring you a shorter video update tonight. Just not feeling really well, running a fever, and all my family has had the flu this week, and I'm the last to get it. Unfortunately, it looks like it's starting to take hold a little bit, but I want to give you just a shorter update. There's some good and there's some bad about tomorrow. If there is anything good, it's that the severe weather threat has shrunk down a little bit in the area, according to the Storm Prediction Center. Remember that yesterday they did have a good chunk of the area in the enhanced. They actually took us all out to nothing but a marginal, and then overnight, and then the last update this afternoon brought the slight risk back up here to just right along the Ohio River, and I think that's a pretty good indication of where it's going to be. I wouldn't be surprised to see that enhanced come a little bit more north. Here's the Kentucky view as well, so you can get an idea. There's the enhanced down to our south over Tennessee and points southward, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's nudged a little bit further to the north. The data, remember, yesterday had a pretty significant chunk of the area up here into the enhanced. The slide extended up into here. Here we take a look at it out in more of a national view again, and the red here is what you would see as your enhanced area. Notice that they've even scaled back the hatched area for the significant severe weather, so that's good. Remember, I told you yesterday that this is one of those situations where it's a marginal kind of setup. I've seen a setup similar to this produce prolific severe weather events. I've seen similar setups be busts with heavy rain, and it appeared this morning that the SPC was starting to bank more on the bust side. Now they've come back and said, well, maybe not. Really hate it when the SPC does that. I have tons of respect for those meteorologists, but I just hate it whenever they do a thing like that, because it confuses the public, and then it just makes people take situations like these not seriously. But I understand why they're doing it. It is one of those setups where there's just a questionable threat here, at least for southern Indiana and portions of Kentucky. It's certainly a stronger threat the further south you go. Again, it's all about the warm front and how far north it lifts. Here's a surface map for tomorrow, and you can see the warm front now they have just barely lifting here into Indiana, and so that wouldn't give much of the warm sector up for us. So let's take a look at what the NAM, the modeling, is saying. First off, here we are to about where we are right now. The warm front is well off to our south. It's sort of stationary, but it's going to be moving back up to the north overnight. And as we do that, you can watch this surge of moisture come with it as you get into the darker colors here, the greens and the blues. That's the moisture surging north, and so that's an indication that the warm front is lifting north. The warm sector is moving north with it, and you've got the cold front advancing out here. There's the low pressure out in here. You've got a warm front sprawling through the area. And the way that you can tell where the warm front is, and so right now this is 18Z tomorrow, so 18Z, that is around noon Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And notice the change in the wind barb. So you got winds here coming from the south, winds here coming like this. So somewhere right in here is roughly where the warm front would be by about noon or so tomorrow. Now that's a little bit of a later arrival than what it was in some other times. And so if you go a little bit more north into the overnight hours, though, here we come to about the time about 6, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. And notice what you've got is you got the warm front sort of stalled out in this sort of general area in here. It's not the exact location. That's just sort of a rough illustration here. You got a low pressure out in here. You got a cold front sort of out in here coming like this. At this particular time, you'd have a broken line of storms kind of lining up, something like this. But your warm front by this particular time, that's terrible drawing here, but there's your low pressure right in here, and your warm front sort of extending somewhere into here. That's not very far into Indiana. And so you can see that the deep moisture doesn't even really make it here into Indiana. We do get some moisture. There's no question about that. But the best parameters for severe weather certainly to our south in here. Now, I don't want to say let's let our guard down here by any means. Certainly that's a threat. We've got some rain coming. There will be some storms coming out of this. But the question is how strong those storms could be because of the warm front not lifting quite as far north. Unfortunately, it's going to just come to a nowcasting event. We're just going to have to see what it does tomorrow. And again, I'm honest with you folks. As I've said, this is one of those setups where it could be a bust or it could be a prolific storm potential, and we'll just sort of have to track it tomorrow afternoon and see how it does. You can visually see that warm front as it lifts north. So here's about 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and you can see the warm front sort of sprawled out in here somewhere. And as you go through the night, as the cold front approaches, it does start to push some of that warmth a little bit more right with it. Could create a little bit of instability on its own as the front rolls through. But by and large, again, this, the warm front just not lifting as far north as yesterday. That's also going to change the axis of the heavy rain, thankfully. And so for you in Kentucky, unfortunately, that might give you a little bit of a longer with the heavier rain. Indiana, not as much so under the latest thoughts. Here, as we go into the overnight hours, you see the heavy rain starting to lift north there. Watch it come along with the warm front there and start to lift north. And as we go into the early morning hours on Saturday, remember that the heavy rain was focused here in southern Indiana. On yesterday's data, it's now focused down towards the Tennessee border. With that warm front, it sort of takes it out of here. That would be good because we wouldn't have nearly the amount of heavy rain as we were thinking we would have with yesterday's data here in southern Indiana. Kentucky, you're still going to get some heavy rain out of this, unfortunately. But here's the line of storms approaching. So by the time you approach maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, got a good developing cluster here out to the west. Some stronger storms possibly developing in there, and then here's your main line. Here's your main line developing just ahead of the cold front as it's sweeping through here. The first cold front. There'll actually be two. The one that follows behind this on Sunday is the one that's really going to knock us back to the wintry temps, unfortunately. All this up here, by the way, it's not rain, that's snow. But we're focused on our section down here. We're definitely not going to end up with that snow. But notice this broken line of storms as it moves through. It's kind of jumpy here. My apologies for that. So not everybody would see this, but we're not talking about probably a straight squall line where everybody's going to end up with this. We're talking more of a broken squall line. So that could be good and that could be bad. On the bad side, it could allow these individual storms to strengthen further than what it would be if they were sort of congealed into one. On the bright side of that, some people may miss out on this while others get hit with this. So it's sort of a trade-off there. Again, another thing that we're going to have to monitor, but that broken line of storms moves through, and so let's sort of time it out here. It's to the it's around to the Paducah area, Mount Vernon, Illinois, not quite to the Wabash River here yet. And this would be about 7 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow night, let's say. And so here's 8, 9, 10, 11, and then here's about midnight through the area here and off towards Frankfort and points towards the east. Definitely not severe by that time, loss of any daytime heating and whatnot. And you can just see it sort of starts to fade out from there. So we'll say anywhere from about maybe 7 to 10 o'clock or so looks to be about, let's just say 6 to 10 looks to be about the prime time this could come through for our area as things stand right now. Again, the latest rain totals, a lot nicer than it was. I'll take just a few tenths instead of a couple of inches of rain like it was showing yesterday. Again, this could still change as we get closer to time, so that's something we'll just have to monitor tomorrow morning. Yesterday, the data looked like a good 1 to 3 inches of rain around the area. Now it's looking like we might not even get an inch out of this. I'm a little skeptical of that, but we'll just end up having to see out of that. We don't need the rain, so this would be a blessing if it does come true. But I wouldn't be surprised if this warm front pushes a little bit more north than expected and pushes that heavier rain threat a little bit. That's something that we're just going to have to see. By the way, I mentioned yesterday that some flood watches could definitely be issued out of this. Flash flood watches have been issued now since I recorded my video for almost all of Kentucky. It does not include any of Indiana yet. Could change tomorrow if we see that warm front start to lift a little bit further north, but we'll just sort of have to wait and see. That's where we stand right now, folks. A marginal risk for most of southern Indiana, and really just a slight risk for the small little portion along the Ohio River here. I do think there's room this could lift a little bit more to the north tomorrow, but we're just going to have to see how far this cold front, this warm front advances. That's everything's sort of going to hinge on that. If the warm front here doesn't advance very far into Indiana, that may be right, and we may be facing less of a severe threat, but we'll just have to see at this point. Next update from the Storm Prediction Center comes out during the overnight hours, and so we'll all be asleep when that comes out, but look for another update tomorrow morning. And of course, I'm not feeling the best, so running a little bit of a fever, as I said earlier, so I'll do the very best I can to keep you updated tomorrow. I don't know whether I'll be getting another video done or not. It just sort of depends on how I feel. I'm hoping I'm feeling better and this gets over pretty quickly, especially with big weather coming in, but I'll be watching it on my phone and at least posting radar shots and other things, so just keep it tuned to my social media pages, Southern Indiana Weather on Facebook, and then you can find me at WillHeightWX on Twitter. All right, take care, folks, and I'll talk to you soon.